Joined now by the Hurling Show host Shane Stapleton to have a look back on the All-Ireland final. And Shane, I guess the key moment was the red card, and it's the big talking point today. First of all, what's your view on it? Was it a red card? Was Richie Hogan leading with the elbow? What's your take on it?
Yeah, well, I mean, when the incident happened straight away without seeing a replay from the Hogan stand from the press box, I said that could be a red card. And then when I saw the replay, I said that has to be a red card because James Owens has a job. And if he goes out and doesn't apply it properly, then all of a sudden he's never going to get a game again. I mean, there are rules there you have to follow. Now, my mentions blew up on Twitter when I did that with, Kilkenny people not being happy and saying, well, what about Cathal Barrett flicking the hurley off Richie Hogan's head a few minutes beforehand when there was a contested ball there? And you know what? Maybe there's a point there too. I mean, if you connect with someone's head with the hurley, any interference with the helmet, fair enough. But I think the thing with, I feel sorry for Richie Hogan though, because we've seen it in hurling so many times. It's happened to anyone who's ever played any sport. You get sidestepped or shimmied, and you just kind of, by reflex, reach out the kind of arm because you want to make some contact. And it had happened to him a few minutes beforehand by Cathal as well. And just the arm caught the face guard. Richie certainly didn't mean to catch him the way he did, but you have to go. And I think it's very unfair to hear people saying that Cathal made too much of it. You got hit in the face by a lad going at 100 miles an hour. You're going the opposite direction. What do you expect is going to happen? Like, that's just a natural human reaction. It changed the game, but I mean, it led to Tipperary winning by as much as they did. But I don't think it necessarily changed the complexion of the game overall. Tipperary had struggled massively in the first 20-25 minutes. I think the first time a forward had a shot from play was 21 minutes. Then Niall O'Meara got the goal, and Tip had gone a point ahead. So Tip had steadied down, finally gotten away into the game. But it had to be a red card. I don't see how it wouldn't be.
Well, the feeling I got was that Richie Hogan was going in to try and get Barrett over the sideline. I got the impression he was going in, he was going to try and leave his mark in it, probably because they had that instant only a few seconds beforehand. And then he obviously got caught, sidestep happens, and I'm with you on this one. I think Barrett has just hit him at speed in terms of when the connection hits, and he was already making a sidestep at that stage. So I don't think he actually over-dramatised that at all.
No, he didn't. It's just, I mean, that's just the way it is. You get hit in the face, especially with the face guard as well. There's actually a shock element too when it hits you. You're just knocked back by it. It's just the way it was. I mean, Kilkenny, I think as the game went on, they really just reverted to the old long ball, and there was nothing more to it. And if you're a sweeper, which Cathal Barrett was playing, and I think it was a good idea to have your speedster as the spare man there. If you just keep trucking long ball all day, as a defender, that's manna from heaven anyway for the likes of Ronan Maher and Barry Heffernan, as we saw. But if you have a spare man back there, all you want is hit long ball onto us. All we have to do is break it, because it'll either go to our goalkeeper or our sweeper. It'll take an extraordinary set of circumstances for Kilkenny to get a few goals out of that, which is what they needed. So they just became very predictable as the game went on, and Tipperary to pick them off.
I was actually a bit surprised that Kilkenny didn't have a bit more variety to their play, because first half they were sticking in it and everything suited them. The rain, the hail that was coming down, the fact the game was tight, they were right in it going up to half time, really until the red card. But second half, as you say, even when Kilkenny had meaningful possession in the second half, the first instinct was to put ball directly in on that full backline for Tipperary. And no surprise that Ronan Maher was coming out with the ball continually. As you say, Heffernan coming out with the ball continually. Though it suited them perfectly to just sit deep and catch balls coming in.
Yeah, and the strange thing too is that they had half time to sit down and figure out what's the best way to keep ourselves in this game. Tipperary on the fly had 14 men against Wexford, and they went from trucking the ball a bit too much to really taking care of the ball and trying to find space. Now Wexford pushed up on Paddy Maher, which meant they left the space in their own half of the field, which was a mistake, and so it proved. And you think Kilkenny didn't really learn any lessons from that. They just trucked the ball, whereas Tipperary continued to pick. Now, actually, Tipperary didn't use the ball particularly well all the time, and Liam Sheedy said that, but they used it well enough at the time. And because Kilkenny were just trucking it, that meant they were going to win. I wonder about some of the selections that Brian Cody made as well. I thought Conor Brown should have been put on Noel McGrath and just tell him stand on him for the whole game, because himself against Michael Breen, I'm not sure either of them massively had a huge impact. I think Breen probably edged that one as well. Killian Buckley, he's not right. I don't think he's right. He's a really, really good player. Excellent. Had some great games over the years, but he wasn't quite able to stick into Noel McGrath, who was man of the match. TJ Reid being centre forward for a lot of the game, went in full forward. Their whole tactic just seemed to be, let's lump the ball down on TJ. And Brendan Maher knew that he just had to try and spoil TJ as often as he could. Now, TJ is always going to make an impact. He's such a brilliant player. But I think that's kind of job done from Tipperary. And Kilkenny probably made it a little bit easy for Tipperary in some respect. John Donnelly was the only guy who really stood up for Kilkenny in that forward line.
Well, even when TJ did get the ball, there was good double cover around him as well. He was turning into blue and gold jerseys continually in that second half.
Yeah, I suppose he was. Yeah, and especially when you are just going route one, that's all you're going to get. Like if you've the pace of Billy Ryan coming on, Richie Lahey, and Richie Lahey looked a little bit off with his touch as well. He spilled one ball on the sideline. It's very unlike him. But if you've got that pace on the forward line, spray the ball around, hit grass with the ball, turn and go at your man. Because over the years, started both halves, Kilkenny won frees by running straight at Tipperary, and they've been doing that for a decade or more. And it was very un-Kilkenny. Like they weren't finding the man in the right position. They weren't going at their men, and ultimately it made it very easy for Tip, and it's sweet for Tip too, because there's still that stain of the 2012 defeat. You know, when the team fell apart that time and it was an 18-point loss. I think to win by 14 points and now have 3 wins in the last 9 years by 8, 9 and 14 points, that's big for Tipperary, because so often Kilkenny people seem to like to talk about how Tip don't like it up them, and I think this is a fair answer.
It cements the legacy for a lot of these guys. Most of that panel now have 2 medals. A few of them have got 3 medals now as well. The fact that they've beaten Kilkenny a few times now in finals as well, they're going to be remembered right up there with the Tipperary team of the 60s, aren't they?
Yeah, like 3 All-Irelands in a decade for, I think it's 5 of them. Bonner Maher, Seamus Callan, Noel McGrath, Paddy Maher and Brendan Maher. Maybe I repeated someone there. But anyway, there's 5 guys that are in there. And like that's some achievement. And especially during an era when you were up against an unbelievable Kilkenny team as well. And there's a lot of change of management. So there's a lack of stability. You know, the cohesion wasn't there at times, you know, because you don't just change the manager, you change the backroom team, you change the S&C, the whole lot. And the fact that they keep coming back when they have been questioned so many times, and they've been questioned so many times, and there have been some limp performances over the years, but the fact that they keep coming back, it's a fair measure of the men.
Look, even after this year, after the Munster final and that 11-point defeat against Limerick and the way they faded on the day, there are plenty of question marks. I know you joked all year about Tipperary being back, but you would have had to have had some doubts after that Munster final.
I had massive doubts, and some of those questions, well, a lot of those questions would have been about how the team is being set up, because I think when you're playing against the top teams now, you need to be able to work the ball short from puckouts and you need to be able to go long. And it didn't seem to me, and look, maybe things that the management had planned just didn't happen on the day, because that can happen. But it just didn't seem to me that they'd kind of looked at every aspect of how Limerick would try and shut them down. And the team has changed since. And you put Seamus Kennedy, 6'2", and an absolute pace merchant. You put Barry Heffernan in there, 6'4". He's able to blot out Lee Chin in the semi-final and does a great job again yesterday. I think, you know, it's no surprise that your team improves massively when you put some more athletes in that team, because there's already talent there. Tip always had talent. When you match it up with a bit of athleticism too, it's a fairly potent combo.
How much of the blueprint is Eamon O'Shea on this? Because just from chatting to a few of the players this morning, all very complimentary about Liam Sheedy and everything he's done, but they mentioned that Eamon had a plan for the way the forwards were going to play yesterday. I'm guessing his brain power has been very important in this system too.
Yeah, you'd imagine so. Even like, I interviewed Michael Ryan recently, who won the All-Ireland in 2016, and he referenced the work that Eamon O'Shea had done in the couple of years beforehand. The fact that there was probably that right combination of steel in 2016 that Michael Ryan's approach brought with the movement that was there in 2015 and 14, we'll say. I think if you look at Seamus Callan, the movement he had in the forward line, he absolutely tormented Hugh Lawler, going behind him, in front of him, left, right, the whole day. I mean, it's actually great work rate when the play is happening at the other end of the field. But yeah, just the way that Tip forward unit goes, it's not an accident. And his fingerprints are there, and I'm sure Tommy Dunn's and Dara Egan's and others are there too.
I was thinking with Callan as well. He was directly involved, just very quiet in the first half, didn't get too many possessions. But he's directly involved in 2 goals and 2 points in that early spell where they blitzkrieged Kilkenny in the second half. It just goes to show his efficiency as well. If he gets the ball, in all likelihood, if it's within 21 metres of goal, trouble is on straight away.
Yeah, but like, he's evolved as well. And there was a period back around 2014 and maybe even in a couple of years before that where sometimes he'd get a chance in front of goals. And 2009 is another example in that final, where he was either putting shots where they could be blocked or he was getting blocked down. And these days, if you look at the goals that he scored throughout the 2019 championship, 8 and 8 games, the amount of times where he'll either take an extra step or a feint, or he'll wait a split second before hitting the ball, like the Wexford goal when it bounced on the ground, and he waited the extra second for it to come up to him. I think he's really evolved as a player, and like he's not just a young rash guy out there just trying to blast through bloody minded. That he's just a thoughtful forward now.
And as you mentioned, his movement's very important too. Like you look at the Bubbles goal, in many ways Bubbles was in kind of the Callan position in terms of where you would have expected him to be. But Callan was more than happy to come out wide and then make the right decision to pass to the guy who was in a much better place to shoot.
Yeah, but as well, Tip would have seen that Kilkenny sit back that half back line as they had against Cork and against Limerick. So at times Callan was going to have to receive it more or less over at the corner flag. Now that probably has been happening all year as well, and it's not an ideal place to be picking up the ball as an inside forward because there's a lot of work to do. But again, he's using his head, he's taking his time, and he's looking up and finding the right man. And sure, that's how Bubbles got his goal, and very well taken by Bubbles too, because you can imagine yourself panicking in that situation when you see the ball coming bouncing in front of you. Did brilliantly.
Well, Liam Sheedy was saying earlier it's important for them to drive a legacy on from here. And you look at that bench and it's stacked with under-20s who are going to be playing in an All-Ireland final this coming week as well. Is there the possibility for Tipperary to really kick on from here? Because I think it was overplayed how old the team was in terms of the starting 15 anyway. You look at that squad yesterday, there's still plenty of life in that team.
Yeah, I think, was it Jamie Wall had kind of done an age average, it was something like 26.8 or 20, something around 27 anyway, which is very good. I think there's probably a couple of teams a little younger, but I can't imagine Galway are much younger. Like, I definitely think this team is capable of another All-Ireland, maybe two, but you just don't know because the level is so... I mean, there's so many teams that are at a similar level. Like Limerick coming back next year, they're going to be really good. Galway, I think, will kick on as well. There's the capability of this Tip doing it again, Tip team doing it again, but it's nothing certain.
The Hawkeye incident was interesting because this is the second game in a row where we saw a graphic go up on the big screen that made it look like it was a lot farther behind the crossbar than it possibly could have been. Like Brian Hogan's arms are long, but they're not that long. I wonder, is that a case of the graphic or is there something wrong with the sensor? Because Ken Hogan was saying to us, his suspicion is that there must be a sensor just over the crossbar and maybe it was actually Brian's hand that triggered it rather than the sliotar.
I think we said that on the Hurling Show, didn't we, after the Lee Chin point? Yeah, I definitely think it because, like, if your hand goes back over the crossbar, like even just that portion of your hand, the width of your hand, that in itself is that going to trigger the sensor? I think it will. And even with the red card for Richie Hogan, I have a feeling that word came from above. I mean, look, it's guesswork on my behalf, but when the referee is pausing for that long, I think it seems obvious enough to me that there is a word coming in. I could be wrong, but that's just the way I feel it.
Well, it doesn't, in a way, it doesn't matter where the decision came from, because ultimately James Owens made the right decision, which was to give the red card. But I did think it was interesting. You went over to speak to the linesman, then came back, and then there was a stall before the decision after that. Is it possible word could have actually came down to him from up on high?
Yeah, I think it is. And I'd say it's probably happened in the past too. And if it all ends up with the right decision, I don't see a massive issue in it. Maybe there should be transparency, but then of course you'd have, you know, like a bit like with VAR and, you know, just Hawkeye in general. You have players gesticulating straight away. Let's go up to the VAR and telling the ref to do it all the time. It would be very soft start. But if it's happening on the fly and it leads to the right decision, that's fine.
It was interesting as well. You know, the big screen didn't show the controversial incident with Hogan. And I think that may well have led to quite a bit of the booing that happened as well. Is they didn't get that angle from the left-hand side, which showed the elbow clearly making contact.
Yeah, I mean that is the definitive one. I mean, as I said, in real time, I very much thought he could be in trouble here. But look, it's hard to know what else to say about it because he looked so despondent when they showed the pictures of him, and you'd feel sorry for him. I've interviewed him a load of times. Very nice fella. And like it's a rough one for him and his family as well, because I know we talk about the amateur thing and maybe it's overstated at times, but like these are very much family occasions. We're in the Tipperary Hotel here, and it's not just players, it's their families as well. And Richie's probably walking around with the weight of that on him since the game happened. So you definitely feel sorry for him. And yeah, I mean, look, it was a red, and just unfortunately that's the way it goes sometimes.
Kilkenny from here, Shane, because you know we talk about Tipperary having youth on the bench. Kilkenny had the youth integrated into the team, which they just have to do. But they found a few players this year. I mean, Adrian Mullen has been a revelation. Hugh Lawler had a great year at fullback as well, you know, coming in their championship debut seasons. Tommy Walsh was saying that he was hopeful enough that this rebuild is moving along nicely for Kilkenny. Where do you see them on the back of this year? Because you know you could argue that they've lost quite a few games even to get to this All-Ireland final.
Yeah, like they lost 3 championship games in the season. They had a draw in there as well. Losing at home to Galway, of course. And in Galway were without Joe Canning, and that's a Galway team that got knocked out. It's kind of hard to know where they're at. Like they've given 6 guys their first All-Ireland final, I mean, that can't be understated because they know they're good enough to get to that level now. They've beaten that Limerick team. So no matter what anyone says, they've had big wins this year. Fine, they've had a couple of losses, regrettable losses, but I don't think they're far away. And like Adrian Mullen's only going to get better. Like there was a stomach bug that he had during the week. Brian Cody played it off, said it wasn't that big of a deal at all. It didn't really have an effect. I mean, it looked like it had an effect. You heard Henry Shefflin talk about last night about the stomach bug. He's his own club man, so you'd imagine he'd have a fair idea of whether he was right or not. There's definitely a couple of the players that have come through that aren't the same level as Stickman that we've seen before. There aren't really Tommy Walsh's and JJ Delaney's coming through at the moment. There aren't too many Henry Shefflins or Richie Powers coming along the tracks. TJ Reid is going to be turning 32 soon, I think. Richie Hogan's just gone 31, and maybe he's had a couple of injuries at this stage. I'm not sure how much more his body can take. Could be wrong. He's such a quality player, you just don't know. But probably some of the best players on that team are coming towards the latter stage of their career. I still think there's a year or two where the newer generation coming through, mixed with the likes of TJ still being there, that they can have another push. But like Galway and Limerick are going to be back stronger next year, so neither of these teams might get back.
I think as well, Shane, Kilkenny are still stuck with a lot of TJ Reid dependency in their forward line. As you say yesterday, there wasn't really other options when he was well marked out of the game. We saw the transformation he made from not having him at the end of the league versus when he was back for championship. If anything happens, TJ Reid gets injured or whatever else, it brings Kilkenny's level down, doesn't it?
Yeah, it probably does. But on the flip side, they did come into the championship with an awful lot of injuries, and they still stayed alive. They managed to beat Dublin. Like, Dublin are a good team. I know they lost to Laois, but they're a good team. They knocked Galway out of the championship, and I think they'll be good again next year. But the fact that Kilkenny got this far with Wally Walsh out at times, Killian Buckley obviously hasn't had a good run at it this year. Conor Delaney, he had a broken foot if I remember correctly. Owen Murphy, he was out for a while, and they still got all the way to the All-Ireland final. I think if they get a decent rest, and I'd say the Club All-Ireland would be finished in January the 19th, I think, in the following season. So if, let's say, Ballyhale get all the way to the All-Ireland final, Cody will have far more time with those players next year. You know, bring Adrian Mullen on even more. So, look, I wouldn't be poor mouthing if I was Kilkenny.
I was just thinking as well, for Noel McGrath, what a story. You know, 4 years ago, he gets that horrible news about the diagnosis that he had. He had a time out of the game. He came back. Everyone was very happy, and just to even see him back playing inter-county, to see him back this summer playing at the level he's been at, man the match in the All-Ireland final, excellent in the semi-final just gone by as well. His third All-Ireland medal, his seventh All-Ireland final. It's a cracking story of coming back, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny, after the game down we all would have been under the bowels of Croke Park, and he came out of the dressing room, and Tip FM were going over for an interview, and he just looked weary. He was just going around like this, and I said to him, "Geez, smile, Noel," and he goes, "Oh, I'm absolutely wrecked." And I was just, when I watched the game back last night, I had one or two soft drinks. I went back and watched the game, and I was like, oh my God, he was on the ball constantly. And there was one time, I think late on in the second half, it was possibly John Donnelly who came in to absolutely bury him, and Noel just turned around, and I think if it was John Donnelly, he ended up on the ground, and Noel just came out with the ball. And I think people probably underestimate how big the man is. He togs out very big as well, and then to have those wrists to go with it, like, what a year for him. 10 years on from being the young hurler of the year, could he actually go on and be the hurler of the year? It's a different discussion. It's probably going to be Seamus Callan, and I think he's certainly going to get nominated. That would be 4 nominations for hurler of the year. That would be incredible for him. And those two lads there for all these All-Irelands for the last number of years. Great story for Noel, for sure. To come back from what he came back from, and of course he would have lost his clubmate Eddie Connolly to brain cancer as well, and that would have, I'm sure, that weighed heavily on him as well. To come back the way he has done has been magnificent.
I was just thinking, we were talking about this last week as well, and all likely to get 2 Tipperary nominees and TJ Reid here. So I'm guessing Callanan and Reid are nailed on for nominations. Then it's probably, I'm guessing, going to be either McGrath or Ronan Maher probably as the other Tipperary candidate.
Yeah, and I don't think the votes will be split anymore. There's a weighting system. You pick 1, 2 or 3, so it's not going to be split as it was in the past. I think Seamus Callanan could have got it in 2016. Paddy Maher could have got it as well. I mean, take your pick there. It's probably going to be those 3. TJ Reid's had an unbelievable year. For a man who's only scored a point from play from the last 3 games, it's been unbelievable. But I'd say it'll have to be Seamus. 8 goals in 8 games. All-Ireland winning captain. Everyone in the camp just talks about the leadership he's shown this year. It'll probably just go to him, yeah.
I was just going to ask you on Callanan, something we talked about quite a bit, and was talking to Tommy Walsh about it yesterday as well. he increased his work rate a tremendous amount this year. He was drifting back out to the half forward line, doing a lot of tackling and harassing in the forward line. I was chatting to the guys earlier on, I was chatting to Niall O'Mara particularly about it, and Niall was saying as a defender it inspires you when you see the likes of Jason Ford and Callan doing the tracking down in the forward line. It makes it easier for you to put the pressure on in defence then.
It does. If good ball is coming into your defence, you're under massive pressure. Can you imagine if nice ball was being popped in front of Colin Fennelly all day yesterday? It would have been impossible for Rowan O'Mara to keep him out. Even that first ball, when John McGrath came back, he was out wing forward at that point, followed Wally Walsh, who had caught the ball over him, probably inside the 45, kept going, got back and got the hoop around the 6-yard box on Colin Fennelly. I mean, that, like, a team is nowhere without having its forwards working hard, because you do defend from the front in hurling, because if the ball is coming down slow, you can stand and watch and wait for you know where it's about to drop as a back. But and that would be the difference with the tip forwards this year. I think just the whole setup as well. They didn't leave themselves as exposed. They didn't leave 80 yards in front of the full back line. I think there was a load of different little things that were very controllable that changed this year. And then as the season went on, the team evolved, the selection evolved, and I think ultimately that's why they got where they are. And Callanan led from the front, there's no doubt about it. I think the first game against Clare early on in the league, there was a 40-yard run he did to hook, I think it was Dave McInerney, and that kind of set the tone, probably even for the year.
Just before we go, did you get to see the minors?
Carlo Kane from the Star was supposed to bring my press pass the other day, and he brought it for me late, or he forgot it the other day, so I didn't get in time for the minors, so I only saw a small bit before the end, before I was able to get into the stadium.
It's a pity you didn't get to see more of Sean McDonough, because I was chatting to Brian Hanley afterwards and he was saying, a special player, cracking talent, doesn't show it all the time, but he's gone on this wonderful scoring run for Galway in the latter end of the championship, and 2 goals and 8 points yesterday. I'm sure you saw the replay of his second goal. A remarkable finish for a 16-year-old kid.
Yeah, sure, like, Galway are always producing them, aren't they? It's just kind of bring them onto the senior stage. Like, I saw that finish into the top corner, like, that is emphatic. That's the sort of goal you grow up dreaming of, scoring in an All-Ireland final. Yeah, four minors in 5 years for Galway. As I said, they're not going anywhere, and another great title for them, yeah.
Brian Hanley was quick to point out it doesn't mean a whole lot if they don't graduate on to senior. I'm sure we'll break everything down in more detail on Thursday as well. Shane, thanks a million.
Sound, thanks very much, Will.